Amazing. 12:03, we are on time. Amazing. Hi. Amazing. Okay, people, we are doing a hybrid meeting with limited sound system capabilities in the room. So, Claudia, thank you for being online and just keeping an eye on sound quality for us while we have this conversation. And yeah, so I think today so this is the beginning of a climate justice speaker series that I'm starting. My name is Shalu. I run a design and innovation consulting firm called Designing Impact. And I've been wanting to do more work in the climate justice space. I was part of the climate-based fellowship, as many of you in the room were part of. And it was a great primer on the climate space, but I was really craving human connection, human stories, the work that needs to be done to kind of have social impact in the climate space. And so instead of me just like having one-on-one conversations, I said, why not make it something that everyone can benefit from, or as many people who are interested in, let's create a community around it. And yeah, so hence this is the first session. I stalked down Ñawi, then found out that he was also a climate-based fellow. And then this is so this is the start. We have 2 more sessions that are already scheduled that I'll be sending out information about. On International Women's Day, we're going to do a session on the gender disparity in the climate sector from a workforce perspective. And there's a report that's coming out, and we're going to go through that report and the data. And then we're also going to do a talk on kind of the disconnect between science and spirituality in the climate space. And we have a couple of crazy smart people who I don't even know they're just going to talk and I'm just going to witness it as all of the rest of us will. But it's kind of like this connection between science and mysticism as we reconnect with nature and how that's missing in the journey right now. Matthew, do you want to come over? We're in this incredible space at 90, which is going to open in April. And Matthew's going to say a few words about the space and what to expect.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you. I will come in here. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all today. Thank you, everyone who came in. Just a couple of quick words about 90. We are building the digital and physical home for climate tech. Something very important is not just creating new solutions, but even the solutions that we have, accelerating them. There are so many stakeholders out there that are siloed, very fractured in the market, and many of them need the same thing. Many of them are looking for deeper connections, and there currently is no Hollywood for climate, or Silicon Valley for climate, or Wall Street for climate. And we feel that creating a hub, a central place where those connections can take place, either digitally or physically, will allow everyone to connect better and to, at the end of the day, move faster. So we're still pre-launch. We're in this beautiful space. We're building out 2 floors of co-working here at 350 California Street. And we're going to be filling the other 16 floors with the entire climate tech ecosystem, launching April 2nd. If you haven't, please sign up, 9zero.com. As we launch, and we'll also be the sole hub for SF Climate Week, probably running 4, if not 5, hopefully no more events every single day. Yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you for joining everyone online. And yeah, if you have any questions, any comments, go to the website. Let's go at 90. That also comes to my inbox, and happy to help if you're looking to join the community, if you're looking for space, if you're looking for events, and anything of the like. So thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you. Amazing. Okay, so we are doing things on time, which is exciting and rare in my life. And okay, so let me introduce Ñawi. We're so excited to have him here with us. Ñawi Flores is a citizen of Apya Yala and Turtle Island. He is a steward of kinship-based Chichupampa Clan Ancestral Land in Ecuador. In his work, he weaves culture, climate science, and technological spaces to amplify the voices of Indigenous people and local communities, IPLCs. in areas that are like from STEM to economy to business. He is the principal founder and consultant for the Kinray Hub, catalyzing bridge building to support IPLC self-determination, governance, and resiliency development through Indigenous research, governance, and data sovereignty, socioeconomic equity, and regenerative education. Woo! Amazing. Thank you, Ñawi, for joining us today.
Thank you. Too kind. And I will have to, if I choke myself, you have to excuse me. I have been a little bit under the weather, and I just fly from New York to California for first time. This is my first time in California, so super excited to be here.
I was like, that's the South San Francisco side. Like, I was like, I don't know what to show.
I don't know what to expect, but from here I'm going also to a different talk and a little bit more exciting talk about biotechnology. So this is my entry to California and thinking about technology in different ways and different ways of knowing. And to acknowledge our diaspora, Alipunja, Tukuja, Mashikuna, Kaipikashkamanda, Shungua, Nipani Kangunata, Tantana Kushkamanda, Nyukanchi, Apya Yala, Jaktamanda, Kaishkamanda. From my heart and from our people in the diaspora and in the territories, we acknowledge your presence as being part of one being. And thank you for welcoming us all together.
Thank you. Amazing. So recognizing that many people that are in the room, myself included, because I'm on the learning journey, can you please tell us a little bit about what does Indigenous and locally led mean? What does that mean to you?
Very good. We need to start when the point is what is development looks like. You know, the reason that we do things is when this perspective of development, we want to create something new, or we want to create something that does a specific job for something. Now you need to drink a water, you want to build a cup. But then we don't think about for whom is this cup. Somebody will need a cup in a different way that does different functions. So Indigenous people and locally led, it means actually acknowledging a different way of knowing how we interact with our ecosystems and our needs. Recognizing that it's not a co-production, it's a self-determination design, something that the Indigenous people and local communities has been experiencing through time, through the historical ecology of being part of something. So that aspect is in Indigenous people and local communities led by the acknowledgement of different ways of knowing, but the cultural value of something, respecting Indigenous people's rights and rights of nature. Those components is in the front center of Indigenous and local communities led, the way that they interact, their ways of life. We cannot just imagine reading a book, an anthropology or archaeology or sociology book or a business book to say, I know about this. Then. No, you know the description, the carcasses, as if you were reading a movie script. That's what we know. We know a characteristic, but the ways of life is intertwined between culture, science, technology, and all of that's happening through the perspective and lenses of culture value. That component can only happen when you really not only a witness, but you live the cultural life. That is indigeneity. So being led by it is not a co-production. It's about self-determination. Are there the designers of that development that needs to happen? That's where, to me, it looks like Indigenous and local community led.
So if we kind of continue that thread of what right now is at the forefront of this indigenously led conversation is when we chatted before, you were talking about kind of how that plays out in terms of conservation, mitigation, as well as adaptation. So what does that look like when we're kind of talking more tangibly about it?
More tangibly, imagine this. In the planetary commons, there is about 5 to 8% of Indigenous people in the planetary commons. That's how we made up. Indigenous people, it makes from the global population between 5 and 8%. From that percentile, between 80 to 85% of the planetary biodiversity is protected by indigenous people and is counterpart of local communities. So tangibly, conservation looks that way. Is the intertwine, the weaving of culture, how culture is a rhythm of your behavior. And that rhythm of behavior intertwines with your understanding of the natural sciences. That nature has a bio capacity that it cannot be passed through it. You are not the governor of that bio capacity. We are the stewards. So conservation for indigenous people and local communities looks into careful understanding of the biocapacity. That takes a level of science and technology, a clear understanding in the applied side, not in the breaking of the pieces. See, science in a way is both. It's breaking into pieces, into components to build something. Technology is very similar to the same way. We break it into the very finer components. Now, think about code. That's the finest things that you can go. And from then you build, you know what it needs to build, the memory chips that you need to build. Then the apparatus that will work, that's the hard work. Then the mechanisms will we do, then is the sensor. Then once again is the interpretation. You see, it goes backwards and forward. For indigenous people, it's everything is happening at the right time, synchronously. And
There's like a systems play,
that
right?
is
It's like, it's
called-
not how a lot of our culture, like that's westernized and all of that is like, we're all about disintegrating and breaking it into pieces.
Very
But
good.
in our conversations, what is so beautiful is that you're always bubbling up to like, there's a complexity and there's a systems orientation that gets lost in this process of like sciencifying.
That's why my point goes back when we say indigenous and local community led, is that it's not about you reading a book, you see? It's about life ways. Life ways gives you the intangibles. That component, you cannot just learn it by a book. You need to live it. You need to have experience through it. So when we talk about as indigenous knowledge systems, it's not traditional knowledge, it's indigenous knowledge systems. Intangible, the best way to think about is conservation of biodiversity, tangibly. That will be a tangible aspect of this in weaving of science, culture, and technology.
One of the things that that we talked about also is how Indigenous voices have not been part of the conversation. Can you just say more about what your experience has been of it, or like what you hope for in the future?
Yeah, let's break this a little bit down. Why? Why is it, in the last decade or so, indigenous knowledge has become a trending. It's a hashtag. You can actually put a hashtag, right? Hashtag indigenous knowledge, hashtag indigenous rights, hashtag indigenous people and culture, right? There is like a million hashtags of that. You can just find it anywhere. But where are the people? Where is the people? Well, what I find that why indigenous voices is missing a lot is because we are confined by some educational hierarchy. We have a lot of research being done on indigenous people. You see, the word own, we are subjects. It's like if you sit down in the park and you create the abstract of this beautiful park. You can add a little more flower here, you can clean up the sky, make it a little bit more blue. You suit it right to your own perspective. That is how most of our research is being done on indigenous people. There is a level of romanticism that's being put up. And it's missing those components of the lifeways, the hardships that we are going through. For instance, there is a huge, let me put it as the statistics of the global south. It takes 5 generations for an indigenous person to go into a college. 5 generations it takes to go into college. And that doesn't mean they will succeed. It just means it will sign up, it will start. But it takes that many generations to go. So we are not doing research. If we are not doing research, we don't have data. If we don't have data, we don't have a voice. Our knowledge is romanticized and tokenized, we much is, because now it's trendy to say, I have traveled to Mexico City and I drink Temazcal and I'm an expert in this knowledge. I own it. You see, right away, you have removed thousands of generations in building that knowledge. All of a sudden, somebody has come in and drink that and is an expert. Our voices is voiceless, is only token. That is the problem. There is an educational hierarchy on the one end that's created by social disparity. And then in the other end, there is this tokenization and commercialization. Those two things put together, and indigenous people will continue to remain a subject of research. And you will continue to hear about our knowledge through a descriptive approach.
Can you talk a little bit about this? When we were in the car, you were just talking about this meeting that you're going to.
Yeah.
And how it's almost like a commercial meeting and you're the one indigenous voice in it. Can you kind of describe a little bit about the vibe of, like, to me, that's kind of maybe even, I'm praying that it is not kind of a tokenistic move to include you in that conversation. I hope that it's actually with authentic intention, but part of me is like, maybe this is what the future is of incorporating indigenous voices, right?
The future will be where we made of and where we designed to it. And we need to start designing with three things in mind, in my approach to doing R&D. One of them is social culture. Are we doing something at a socio-cultural level? The second thing is the social environmental level. And the third thing, it should be our social economics. We are doing the other way around. We are focusing too much in the social economics. We only focus to find solutions with the goal of the social economics. So this meeting I'm going because I am governing my own research. I am doing my own sovereignty on my own data. So even if it is tokenistic, even if it's commercialistic, what I give is my own making. It's not somebody else's making. That nobody else can replace it. That only indigenous research governance can do it. That's why I'm not afraid of the future of how it will be tokenized. But we need to be in that conversation. We need to be in that decision making. You see, indigenous people so far has been subjects. When does it become stakeholders? And once you are stakeholders, for me, I'm becoming shareholder. You see, that should be the evolution. It's the same thing when you think about it. We have been doing a lot of management of resources. And then we have morphed ourselves into the sustainability. And from sustainability, we are morphed into two words, either regenerability or resiliency, right? We are trying to go that way. And it's the same thing for indigenous people right now. In order for our voices not to be silenced, even if we are the token of the conversation, it's better to be in that situation and fight and face it than be behind the curtains and somebody else's descriptive morphology of who we are. See, that's even disconnected and in a way like opening this social gap so wide that there is no bridge that you can build. But I think a few of us in my generation went through my indigenous discourse and diaspora. I feel like we are start building the bridge of bringing indigenous knowledge for what it is. Indigenous knowledge is a how, it's not what.
Love it, love it, love it. This is like a big bucket of conversations, but we talked about, I think it's kind of going back to like how indigenous communities hold so much more complexity in every action and every movement than like what we've been doing in our societies. And we talked about the economy And we talked about how the indigenous economy is different from the contemporary economy. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means to you?
I can talk a little bit more than that. I will try to, yes, I sometimes I try to do a lot of analogies in that sense.
We're good.
Indigenous economy is you need to start to understand that you need to start with a question. Why do indigenous people need money? You need to ask the question. Why? Once you find the answer, then ask, who created this need? You need to ask those two questions. And if you can truly answer transparently, you will find the answer. But indigenous economy actually is focusing cultural value, not cultural value, but cultural value is embedded into our social ecology behavioral rhythm, meaning nature for us is not capital when seen. It's not something that you can trade it, sell it. It's capital when K. Is a sentient being, something that you need to steward. In the mountains, we steward the water that comes from the glaciers, from the rain. We steward it so it falls down all the way to the rainforest. So our siblings, humans and non-humans, can enjoy the same joy that we had. That's capital. We are stewarding the capital. So all of us have a piece of it. When we think about soil, we think about the same way. So imagine this, seeds. And here, we need to buy it. We buy seeds in the stores. You go, if you want to grow a broccoli, you need to pay for it. But in us, seeds is our most valuable capital. When which, if you feeling like I need something new for my season, you go and trade it. You keep it. You will keep it when the hope is that the next season, the next year, your neighbor, your clanship, your community, it will give you 5 times more than what you live. It returns to you 5 times more. If you want to be in classical economics, a compound interest in that. But we don't see it that way. We see it as a way of stewarding our capital, of enriching our capital. So that is a crucial difference between contemporary economy, which we dollarize every single transaction that we make. And that is an imagined reality. That's our own imagined reality that we put so much pressure in that one value. Imagine that you came in and one day somebody say, you go with $1, you want to buy this glass of water, and that person say no. What you will do? And the store say, I will not take the $1. Then what happened? You see, that paper is the imagined reality. But if you are in a community with indigenous people, if you go when a gourd fill when our classical drinks, and you offer, they will not say no. They will receive it and give back to you when a different drink. Is that a cultural value transaction? Perhaps in our economy and the climate change solutions cannot be changed by only thinking about the commodity and the scalability. It needs to start thinking about the conversation of social ecology behavioral crisis. That should be our question. That should give us an insight into what is missing when we are trying to create change.
Can you say more about what that is? Because I feel like if that is the future of what linking to indigenous economic practices are, like what could that look like?
So let's think about like what is capital? How we value is capital only the monetary thing?
It's also assets, resources.
Assets, resources, right? Knowledge. Knowledge is a form of capital. So imagine that we could actually literally be willing to share knowledge. Like right now, I came here openly and willingly, like not open source. That's a mistake. It's not open source. It's a common. We need to think about this as a commons, as part of the commons. And something that is part of the commons, it needs to be communing or being a steward. So all of us inside this global, we need to start thinking about how do we common this shared knowledge. That should be our approach.
Mhm.
How do I share knowledge and how do I receive knowledge? How do I support somebody and receive support? We need to start, in a way, we need to start thinking about how do we become a little bit more elastic
Mhm.
and less rigid. Think about contracts, the way that we do collaborations. We focus on contracts. And then, of course, some lawyers that will say, but that's the only way that we can uphold investment. But how about trust? How about trusting in people? How about trusting in your client? How about building trust, engagement? What are those capitals, those forms of social capitals that we have lost? So to me, there is 4 ways that we can think about this. There is, and this is not just coming from me, this is actually, I also learned even more. I highly recommend checking up Common Land. In there, they describe 4 things, and I kind of like to think about that too. There is a way of inspiring people. We need to inspire people. We don't need to manage them. We need to inspire them. We need to create social capital. This moment, this meeting that we do in virtual and in person, this should be the moment that you start thinking about what is my social capital? What am I bringing into this conversation? Then you should think about your natural capital. Where do I want to live and how do I want to live? Thinking less about not in my backyard. Think about yes in your backyard. What you will do if this is in your backyard? And then at the last end, you should actually think about your monetary capital. That should be your 4 ways of thinking this. And these apply, I have applied it in agriculture, I have applied it in economics, and I'm trying to apply in business, the same approach. It's taking me a long time. My businesses tends to not to scale in the way that the Western view wants to invest. My way is it needs to go horizontally. That should be the best way of scaling this, creating nodules.
Awesome. I'm gonna do 2 more questions, and then if other people in the audience have questions, would be great. One of the things that you're starting to touch on, is data ownership. There's a nonprofit that I worked with recently that was trying to kind of, well, all of us are used to our data being owned and taken away from us, right? And is there a moment when we're thinking about communities that are like about to get their data taken or have had their data taken for a while? So this nonprofit I was working with was looking at farmer data and how we could get industries to pay for that farmer data, where there's a consent moment for, and this is like talking about rural India farmers who, have some, smart devices, but are not used to normal contracts and things like that. And so how do we bring these 2 ecosystems that have not spoken to each other to actually work together and in benefit and provide some economic value for the farmer? And so you've done some similar work in this area, so I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about it.
Yeah, this is very important. At this stage, it's super important to think about data sovereignty, like in your data governance and how you look at this. And I find that indigenous people and local communities are a best case study for this. Historically, indigenous people and local communities has been used for what the resources that they can provide, what the resource is available, what is ready to be extracted. Either that is a knowledge into a medicine, a practice, or a plant, a soil type, a mineral. So in that sense, that their data constantly has been taken away. And then you can think about like a genomic data. Genomic data keep trying to look for indigenous people because they need the data to train their AIs, their machine learning in order to provide precision medicine. So in that sense, historically, we have been having a hard time to govern our own data. What are the frameworks that we need to apply? So there is 2 things that it can play a crucial role. One of them is indigenous people's rights. That is a declaration from the UN. Indigenous people has the right to practice knowledge, preserve, and any of the derivatives within their territories. The second thing is the free and pre-informed consent. The free and pre-informed consent is meant actually not for a researcher or a company or organization to say, I went and I socialized my project. No, the free and pre-informed consent is that, did you do all that due diligence for the indigenous person and local community to understand the ins and outs of your project? What data are you collecting and where the data will go, how we'll be using, and what is the outcomes of the use. That is the free and prompt consent. Those two elements is what we need to be applying back again, not only with indigenous and local communities, but as a general rule within our population. You see, when you click a new app, they give you this whole list. And I find it so hard to me. Now, I speak this language, but when I try to read, it's just convoluted.
Mhm.
It's like those contracts are meant for you not to read it.
Mhm.
They are not clear by design. They are not clear. They are meant to create urgency.
Mhm.
If you start reading the paragraph and you don't get it, you click on it. Just make the experiment. It happened to me twice. Just click on that thing. Let's move on. And that's the same thing that has happened historically when the free and prompt consent.
Yeah.
Convoluted contracts that has actually only been given to a indigenous leader, not a community, and take that consent and make it general, as if the entire community has acknowledged the participation. That's what is happening with the climate colonialism, when this new climate market, the climate tech solution space. So when we come into data sovereignty, that's piece of the puzzle. We need to think about indigenous research governance. Indigenous people should be part of that research design. As the people that we are in here. No, when you do experiments in the lab, you go through a process that you learn why you are participating in the research. Either it's for medicine or sociology, you learn it. You have to understand why you want to participate in that specific research. Indigenous people doesn't happen that way. It's just somebody one day appear and is sitting down in a rock, writing down about this person washing the clothes in the rock. You see, that is not about community-led participation. By indigenous research governance, it provides the tools for care. There is a principle that was developed back in 2018 that's called care and fair. Those two principles, it should help you to guideline how the data should be solved and what are the benefits. What are the benefits that are coming from the data? And that should not be confused with co-production. Co-production, in a way, symbolizes that indigenous people doesn't have enough self-determination to produce their own knowledge. See, that's co-production. It needs to be a design, how indigenous people are designing research questions that are of their local climate, cultural context in order to govern also the data. Those four things need to come in place in order to really think about this, bringing together.
Love it. Okay, I'm gonna cancel my last question because I want to go into one other thing
Sure.
that we talked about.
Sure.
So along the lines of data sovereignty, someone coming and watching someone washing their clothes on a stone, right? A lot of kind of this development mindset has existed
Yes.
where someone from the outside believes that they have the knowledge and skill to solve.
Mhm.
And that has actually led to lots of negative implications. for populations around the world.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about what that has meant for indigenous
Yeah,
communities?
that's a very important question. So it's a little bit emotional to talk about this because is this going back to the question of why indigenous people need money? Actually, indigenous people use about between 75 to 85% of any monetary resources that they gain, they use to defend their territories. They pay in legal fees. To whom? To somebody in the global north. Think about that. The money never stays in the community. It leaves. It comes in and it leaves in legal fees. And the vicious circle continues. That's development. So development actually is a finding word. By about 1986, the UN, the Assembly of UN, the plenary of the Assembly of UN came out together and it gave the rights to develop about 1986. But way before that, way before that, like in 1491, started development in the Americas. Development started way before the outside Americas, but since we're in the Americas, let's talk about the Americas. So before that, we have utilizing this approach of development from the different perspective that's coming from monetary capital and also religion, the idea of how humanity should look like, what a human looks like. Those two approaches of development has really think about the disappearing of indigenous people and the displacement of indigenous people, to the point that development actually has created an indigenous diaspora within their own territory. Think about in the United States. Think about reservations. By around 1491, there was millions of people in here, thriving. By the 1960s, there were less than 1 million indigenous people in reservations. From those almost 1 million, then by that time, they decided to actually create conservations, protection, national park areas. And then they took them and they removed them from the cultural practice of interacting with nature. Why? Because of development. Because development first is a land use change. They took forests into timber, they took it into agriculture, they took it into mining, and then into oil. That was what I call it development 1.0, immediate remuneration. It destroyed that. That has been development. So, development for whom? For whom are we developing? And now the same approach actually is not only affecting indigenous and local communities. It has been created a major diaspora in our own territories, but also has created an international indigenous diaspora, which has put us into conflict between indigenous people. Because indigenous people from the Americas, we are now recognizing even ourselves as siblings because of the geopolitics and the politics in general. We are actually, then about 2015, it was the closing of the idea of development when the announcement of the UN agenda for 2030. They announced the sustainability developmental goals. That's the way announced. That was the last slap in the face of the idea of development. But you know what they did wrong? They stained the framework when development. Because now they have opened the doors to a second development 2.0. Under the name of climate change, now we have entered into the race to go and create national protection, reforestation areas outside these territories into the global south. And now we are creating even further displacement. We are creating even further diaspora called immigration. Then we are called immigrants. Then we are blamed because of the economic tanks. then the question comes back again. Should be sustainable developmental goals, or quoting from a text that I read, or should be sustainable survival goals. Because to me, it feels that we are trying to survive. We are no longer developing. We are taking the same cut and just making a different color. But indigenous people has a different way of seeing this. And this is why my call is in here. If we are truly thinking about transition into transformation, we need to start thinking about the integration of indigenous diaspora knowledge systems, because there is something in there, something in indigenous knowledge systems that speaks, interesting enough, to the social ecology and behavioral rhythm. How do we bring cultural value to the climate where we exist?
Whew, I feel like everything you say is like a mic drop. I'm like, I need to write down every word you're saying, like it's a book. Amazing. I wanted to open it up and give people time to chime in with any questions. I have not, Claudia, thank you for monitoring chat. I don't know if there are any questions surfacing in the chat yet. Nothing yet, looks like. Yeah, any questions in the room we can start with? Yeah, go ahead.
Simple one, but the book that you recommended before the approaches.
Yeah. It's not a book, it's a website. It's called Common Land. Common Land. Yeah.
It takes 5 times to hear.
No problem.
I know. Definitely. Absorb all the different sources of info.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, check it out. Definitely the website has some knowledge. Yes.
Yeah, one question. I find often I think if you talk about conservation here, it's frequently a conversation here in the Bay Area where we want to conserve the beautiful nature here, or in the Arizona deserts and these different places that sometimes we lack a more international perspective. Right now, we're looking at the mining of rare earth metals and many forms of exploitation for the good of the climate in its own way. But I wonder what is your perspective on how to prevent, conservation for me, but not for thee from an international perspective, where we say, oh, we can't take lithium out of the salt flats here in California, let's push that to Bolivia, let's push that to Chile and these other less legally protected areas.
So just to repeat the question for everybody on Zoom, your question is kind of like, when we look at the topic of conservation from an international lens, how do we make sure that, how do we kind of enter that space with the right mindset, instead of saying, like, I don't know if I'm saying it right. Do you want to come closer?
Sure. I think in regard, how do we
Come over.
all the more things that
Yeah.
But yeah, my question was, we can fight very hard to conserve locally, and we in the global north often have the power to sometimes succeed at that, but sometimes lack the perspective of what implications that would have in a more international perspective, that perhaps we're just pushing exploitation to the global south to less protected peoples. And I'm wondering what we can do, both where we are, where we intend to help conservation, to keep in mind these more international perspectives.
I was just asked to review a framework for a nature's financing framework. So it very much is in frame went down. So this is where the question is very ingrained in these two ideas. The idea that not in my backyard, right? Like as long as it's not happening right in my backyard, I don't care. And most of our social ecology crisis is based on that. Is that we know it's happening, but it's not happening in my backyard. So just, switch it out. Don't put it that way. But the way that we should be thinking about is how do we share risks, responsibilities, and accountabilities? Primarily, when we need to be centered in business, we should be centering into human and indigenous people's rights. That should bring us into the conversation of this is a planetary commons. This is not a Bay Area in California. Lithium is not a problem in all California. Lithium is a problem of the planetary commons. And therefore, our approach in California should be the same thing in Chile. If our business framework takes into consideration human and indigenous people's rights. Those rights should be a business guideline. That should be taking it. And free and prompt consent should be a way for us to be transparent in what are we doing to ensure that those rights are as being proactively put in place. That's where those two things exist. Unfortunately, business, we have allowed business to guide the imagined reality that is innovation, where innovation is actually coming from human adaptation. If we adopt this new concept, that is innovation. Business is a carrier. That component, think about those two things, human and indigenous people's rights and free from consent, embedded in how they are transparently informing the shareholders and investors of what are you doing? Either this mining could be happening in Chile or in here. Shouldn't matter. It should be still within the framework, right? It should still be acknowledging how am I interacting with the entire community and what is actually my sociocultural, my social environment, and my social economics impact. That's what we should be looking at first. That should be our demand to the business. We should be asking them. But instead, we are like, what can I do? Well, stop buying those things that's coming in from these very poorly designed businesses. One thing, like let's start there. And then let's start looking for alternatives because there are alternatives is coming into float. So I will say that could be a start.
Great. Just gonna look at the chat. One question, Claudia, I'll just read it out loud because I think the sound was a little weird before. What is the most important shift you'd like to see our society embrace to transition away from our current rigid economic systems?
Ooh,
Thanks, Claudia.
a good thing I am not an economist. Well, one of the things that I think we need to start breaking silos. And we definitely will need to start thinking about this interdisciplinary. And the major shift that is missing in here is that we are not talking to each other. We continuously brag about networking, but when it comes actually to the doing, we are not sharing resources, not sharing experiences, not sharing knowledge. So a transition into transformation, it needs to start with our personal action. And that comes into carefully think about this. Social ecology behavioral crisis. What is my crisis right now? What are some of the bad habits am I doing here? How can I do this to do better? If it is like I use the word networking, it might really network. It might be intentional in this. It might offering something, not just asking. It might offering something. That's transdisciplinary. That is a value economy. See, in practice, that is a value economy. Don't just ask. That's an imagined reality that you just desire something. You want, but what do you need? That's a crisis that I would like you to explore. Crisis when a K, not when C, when a K. explore it. That will be my fear. The biggest thing that I can see a transition is when the society, the global south and the global north, society start questioning this. Because at the end of the day, remember, business is just a carrier. The real innovation is in your hands. You need to adopt it. If you don't adopt it, then it's not innovation. See? If we do that transition, then creates transformation. Then I have done my job. And that's what I'm doing when the kinship-based community, breaking barriers, opening the cyber transboundary community of our knowledge. That's what I mean here.
Along that same line, I would love for you to share a little bit about how all of us can be in service of your work and your goals.
Of course. Well, for once, you can follow me in LinkedIn. And Kinray Hub is a Indigenous-led research and resilient development. We are constantly putting knowledge out there, and sometimes we do some fundraising campaigns. The fundraising often pays for sometimes my trips to come in and share knowledge. Everything that we do at Kinray Hub right now is pro bono. We are not raising funds. We don't have private investors. We have a little bit of our own self-determination in the knowledge that we want to share with the people that we want to participate and work and consult. We are looking for accomplices in this journey. And we find that collaborators and partners, they just, it doesn't go all in, but we find that a accomplice, you are all in, you sold them the idea. You have gained passion in there and inspired by what we're doing. So follow us in LinkedIn. Sometimes we have campaigns. Right now, I'm trying to raise some funding to travel to a gathering of indigenous leaders in Uganda, a global indigenous gathering in Uganda that it hopefully amplifies the voices of the global south. What are we doing in the global south? We are a grassroots, very grassroots group. We're coming from the ground up, bringing lessons and teachings from the ground. We are constantly looking for alliances, bringing opportunities to collaborate and chat, share knowledge, bring some inspirational capital to all of you. So those are ways that you can contribute. Follow us, be in touch. We have also.
This is Ñawi's Venmo.
That's my Venmo.
We're trying to raise, so like this gathering is literally happening in Uganda in a couple of months, and he's trying to raise funds to be able to go and participate. So this is his Venmo. And send him whatever you feel like. I think this is an incredible global Indigenous-led leadership community that's coming together. And so getting him over there feels like something great that we could all support.
Yeah, that's something that I'm trying to do, to bring more of this knowledge. And also, of course, we are writing. We are trying to put this knowledge to the commons. So if you like science writing, or you like this kind of, you want to share the kind of capital that you have, we have this knowledge capital that we have, that we can become accomplices and bringing something out for the community for those that were not here right now to hear, might want to read it, or you might want to read it later on. So we're also looking for those accomplices to amplify those in different media elements. So we are doing a lot of those components. And we also have summer and winter internships in our site. We are building our own laboratory to the land stationed in the Andes of Ecuador, where we are working with community to bring all this indigenous biotechnology knowledge into food systems transformation. So if any of you is looking something crazy, we do have summer internships, cultural experience, and winter internships that we go down there and we really think about this idea of lifeways instead of sitting from the lines. Don't just be a witness, get embedded and get to know. So those are other aspects that we have. And check out our website, of course. If you want to collaborate, there's a sign-up sheet that you can access very easily, and let us know.
Amazing.
Mhm.
Great. This is
Yes.
my email. I did not add yours, but I'll send it out in the email
Sure.
summary that goes out to everybody with the Zoom recording as well. But thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Ñawi, for
Oh,
sharing your
yes.
wisdom and
Thank you. Thank you.
your experience with
I'm
us.
glad to be the first one in your.
I know, you're the first experiment.
Experiment.
No, I like basically stalked him down. We did one chat and then I was like, how can we get your word out? How do we like share the amazing, incredible work you're doing? So thank you so much. Literally got off of the airplane and we came here. So thank
Yeah.
you again.
Yes.
Great. And thank you everybody for joining us virtually.
Yes.
Somehow it all happened.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Have a great rest of your day.
I'm gonna stay
everybody.
for a little longer in here.
Yeah.
Drink some water. If you want to ask any questions,
Lots of snacks
I'm in
left
here
too.
still for a little bit. Then I will take a Uber and
Awesome.
got other place I need to be.
Okay, thanks everybody online.
Thank you.